In real life today.
What's up, everybody? It's Q and Chop, chopping it up.
Yo, QQ, what's up, man? How we doing?
Man, I'm blessed, man. Another day, man. I'm just glad to be here, man. How about you?
Glad to be here another day, man. Just working out here and just chilling, working.
Yeah, man. It's a beautiful day, man. Man, we got a great guest, man. Who we got today, Chop?
Hey, guys, today we have Patrick Lagreid from Halfwheel.com. Patrick, how we doing?
Doing well. How you guys doing?
Doing great, man. Blessed. You know, it's starting. It wants to rain. It doesn't want to rain over here in Raleigh, so it's weird.
I hear you. Well, we're in that point of the year out here in Phoenix where it seemingly never rains, and when it does, it makes front page news. So we're just settled in for 100 degrees plus every day for the next what about two-ish months? So sunny and bright, but definitely warm.
That's that dry heat too, right?
Very dry. Yeah, it's about. I was talking with a friend of mine in Havana the other day, and we were comparing weather. And I said, yeah, well, like, here's the thing. It's 84 degrees and like 86% humidity where you live. It's 105 degrees and like 6% humidity where I live. So it's kind of pick your poison. And I've always been more of a dry heat than a humidity fan. So yeah, it's hot and dry.
Yeah, you don't want to be all sweaty and armpits. You know, you get the circular armpits. It's not a look view at all.
Not a look. Got to keep those dark shirts on hand, you know.
All right. So Patrick, tell us a little bit more about you. Where you're from, and we go from there.
Yeah. So I grew up in Seattle. Spent a couple of really good years of my life in San Francisco for college, and then have been in Phoenix for the last 10 years or so. Actually, going on 11 now. And as far as what I do, I'm a writer and editor, as well as a partner in Halfwheel and its related site, which is called Tenemu.com, which is a beer site, sort of the Halfwheel approach to craft beer. So in terms of what I do, it kind of varies day to day, but reviewing cigars, writing news stories about the cigar industry, covering legislation, mainly at the state and local level, things to do with smoking bans, smoking laws, taxation, all sorts of things like that. And then I also work a little bit on the federal side with one of my business partners, Charlie Minato. And then also, I do all the lighter reviews for the site, so I'm kind of a lighter geek and know about all those things. And then beyond that, I also am fortunate enough to work for Major League Baseball in their stats department and am a voiceover artist, meaning that I do everything from commercials to phone systems to how-to videos and all sorts of other things you probably wouldn't believe if I told you. So it's a really nice, it's a nice mix, and get to wake up, make coffee, do voiceover, smoke cigars, watch baseball games, or go to another sporting event because I do the PA announcing for a couple of teams here in the Valley. And it's a pretty good setup. And like I said, I hope I don't have to grow up and get a real job one of these days.
that just the way you said that sounds like a good day for me. Just wake up, get the coffee, smoke a little Connecticut, for the midday, watch some baseball, get something to eat, do some voiceovers, for me, it'd be podcasting and just do more cigars, at night, it's
a real fortunate situation I have. So I'm blessed and happy to be able to do it, and happy that people keep letting me do it. So,
that just speaks to who you are as a person. When somebody does what they love, you never work a day in your life. So, how did you
Very true.
Get to the field doing what you love? How did
you get there? Everything kind of overlapped at certain points. I came out of a background of radio, working mainly music stations and a little bit of sports radio, and the cigar piece ties into this because when I was an intern at a station in Seattle, we had this little cigar and martini bar across the street from the radio station. And so we were kind of, hip hop R&B station. So we'd be at nightclubs and on weekends. And it became this sort of tradition where one of the DJs would give an intern like $50 and send them across to the cigar bar and say, hey, go get a couple things for the club tonight. And so that kind of sparked my interest, but like I wasn't really smoking cigars. Obviously the interns couldn't. So went back to college, never really started smoking cigars, and then was driving around Seattle after I graduated and actually stopped into that place. And so I want to see like what the cigar thing's about. And as I tend to do with things I find interesting, I dove into it pretty deep and quick and just started going to a local cigar shop and learning everything I could and trying to understand what was so different about, these 500 cylindrical brown tubes that were all staring at me with different color bands. And, there's a little bit different color and one was bigger than another. And then you'd have one that was like, you'd see 5 different sizes for the same band on it. So like, what was the difference in that? And fortunately had a really good retailer who taught me a lot about cigars, and then decided to come to Phoenix moved down here in November of 2009 and was writing about cigars for a now defunct website called examiner.com. That led me to writing for a magazine called Cigar Snob. That led me to joining up with Charlie and Brooks to launch Halfwheel on January 1st, 2012. And, 8-9 years later, here we are talking with Q and Chop about cigars. So right. Pretty non-linear route to the goal. But, I've come to learn that, nothing in life is purely a straight line. So it was all this kind of ebb and flow between baseball and whatnot. And, my voice changed at one point. People said, you need to start using your voice to make some money. So that gets me from here to there to there. And fortunately, I just was able to find a situation that allows me to do all 3 on a daily basis, more or less.
That's awesome. I write too. I write the blog for Q and Chop, and I write the descriptions and all that kind of stuff. So how did you get your writing out there? How did it get noticed by the next company? What was it? Was it just your writing was that good? Did you try to market yourself more outside of their own platform? How did you go about that?
Yeah, so my mom was a newspaper editor, and I had sworn that I was never, ever going to get in the media, because, when you're in the newspaper business, you got to go cover stories, and you've got, she was an editor for a weekly paper, and so there was always these late nights on print night, and I never really wanted to get into it. I always wanted to stick more to broadcast, and then I was actually sitting in the press box at Safeco Field when I was in Seattle, working for a radio station that carried the Mariners games. And it was right around Hall of Fame induction weekend, if I'm not mistaken. And what I realized is that it was the writers who elected the people to get into the Hall of Fame, not broadcasters, not radio guys. And it started to kind of light a little spark underneath me. And I literally just started writing everything I could. And whether that was like commercial copy for the radio station or promo copy. And then I pitched a feature about baseball books, because I love to read, and there's so many books written about baseball. So I started pitching that. And then at the time, everyone and their mother had a WordPress blog or 6. And so I started doing that, and then pitched myself to examiner.com, and they brought me on to write about some things in Seattle, and then went from writing about local cigar shops in Phoenix to writing the national column. And then, you just kind of, it's like walking up a set of stairs. You take that first step, and you're going to fall at some points. And I certainly don't think my writing was ever that good. In terms of like, I didn't, just come out of the womb with a Pulitzer in my hand. But no, you keep writing and building, and thankfully some really great people along the way believed in me and gave me the space to do it. And whether that's the people I worked with up in Seattle and radio, or, Eric Calvino at Cigar Snob, and then obviously Charlie and Brooks. And fortunately, like I said, one thing just kind of kept leading to another. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely. I've heard like a Medium, the app. I've heard they used to write on that.
Mm-hmm.
So, definitely those avenues.
Yeah. It's the one thing I would always say is you just have to be willing to, like, you have to be willing to take on that one extra article or send that one extra email, because you never know, like, any business, any profession in a lot of ways is a game of attrition, meaning that some people are only going to send 10 emails, or they're going to say, well, I wrote my, 2,000 words today. I'm done for the day. And for me, you just have to keep, reaching out and looking for opportunities. And I think, especially like in the voiceover world, that's something that I really try and take to heart, is that, like, people say, well, voiceover is just commercials and stuff like that. I'm like, no, it's not. It's like, and what I tell them is go out and for the next couple of days, pay attention to where you hear recorded voices. And it's weird because then you'll start doing it and you go, oh yeah, like there's commercials and there's stuff like that. But then, you'll go to the airport and you'll say, unattended cars will be towed. Well, somebody like had to record that and they got paid for it.
Right.
Or, you call your bank and it says, thank you for calling XYZ Bank. To speak to a customer service representative, press 1.
That sounds so clear.
Yeah, I mean, there's somebody that did that. And then, like, you even go another step further and you go, somebody like Siri and Alexa are real people.
Right.
So somebody did that. And I've done projects teaching artificial intelligence how to recognize emotions because they were, they had a kind of a base level stuff. And what they realized is that your Alexa or your Siri could actually be used to pick up your mood. But they have no frame of reference. So I'd get these Excel sheets that were a mile long and I just had to say these phrases angrily. And sometimes it sounded incredibly stupid if you were just listening to me. But that's sort of the next wave of technology is that you can ask Siri a question, for instance, and Siri can say, hey, like, you sound sad today, Q. Is everything okay? Or, Chop, you sound like you're frustrated. Would you like to open your meditation app and take a 5-minute breather? So that's all these different things are out there and you just have to listen to them and pay attention to them and you start figuring it out, and it's crazy. Like it never ceases to amaze me because I will be watching TV or just out on my errands and I will almost without fail hear a recorded voice somewhere that I had never thought of. And I'll go back home and I'll start sending emails to those companies and say, hey, how do you get your voices for this? And some people will say, like, some people will not reply. Some people say, well, we already have people. And then, look, if it's 1 out of 10 that says, well, we'd love to hear your voice. Send us a demo. Well, maybe that 1 out of 10 turns into a national TV spot. You never know.
Right. You never know. And, it's just people are just double like guess themselves. They like, if I do send it and they don't take, like, they don't respond back or they just don't, people have that doubt on themselves,
Oh yeah. Look, it's that's certainly understandable. And look, having been on the other side of that, I mean, we get story pitches and product pitches all the time for Halfwheel. And, we try and respond to as many of them as we can. And not all of them are going to be yeses for one reason or another. And, I don't set an expectation, when I send out an email. I just hope that if, not to get like, what metaphysical or whatever, but like if it's meant to be and it's meant to be now, it will be. And if it's not, it's the universe or whatever your higher power you want to call it saying, this isn't a venue where you're going to shine your brightest. So sometimes, not getting what you think you want only opens the door to getting something better that you didn't even know existed.
Right. That's a mindset. And where'd you get that mindset from? Not everybody has it.
Lots of self-help books.
And that's a good idea. People will need to read those kind of self-help. I like John Maxwell, Kiyosaki, and people like that. Do you have any suggestions of a good self-help book that would maybe might use?
I think there's a lot of them that are out there, and I think a lot of them tend to be rooted in the same central message. It's just that sometimes you have to find the right one that speaks to you. I was a big fan of Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now for a long time, which was, essentially trying to shut your mind off from being critical about the past and trying to predict the future and just being present in the moment and allowing yourself to function and kind of quiet the noise, so to speak. And I'm going to space out on some of these names because I feel like I read them a lot, or I read a lot of things and I kind of lose track of the names. But I think, it's just finding one that seems to resonate with your beliefs and sort of your worldview. And, sometimes that's even things like just, you have to think about what it is you want to become. And, like Wayne Dyer had the whole no limit, I think it was called the No Limit Life. which is just like, why put a limit on yourself? And I use this example with, with kids that know that I work in baseball, and it's like, well, like, what do you want to be? And say, well, I want to make the major leagues. And I'll say, wait, like, that's cool. But like, why would you not say, I want to be, and this doesn't exist anymore because it already happened. Like, why don't you say, I want to be the first unanimous Hall of Famer? And that, obviously Mariano Rivera did that last year, but like, set the expectation at the impossible. Like, why limit yourself just to saying, I want to have an at bat in the majors? Like, that's great. But like, if you're already that close, the difference between, getting to that level and becoming a Hall of Famer in the grand scheme of it isn't that much. And some people are going to look and say, well, there's, that's not true. But look, it's like you're already halfway there. You just got to push above that, what somebody referred to as the boiling point. It's like water at 211 degrees isn't boiling. It's just really hot. But you give it that one extra degree and all of a sudden now it's boiling. So why not just put that one extra degree of work in?
Yes, that 1 inch, of more,
Oh, and you never know when that might be the most critical inch that you put in. Again, like I say, you never know when that one extra email that you send or that one extra, idea or risk that you take or person that you talk to at an event is going to be the one that ultimately pays dividends, even if the last 100 didn't. But sometimes you have to think, like, if it wasn't for those last 100, I wouldn't have gotten to the one that mattered.
I like that mentality from you, Patrick. I tend to tell all our listeners like that, I have personally, emailed a lot of people, for an interview, and I'm glad that you accepted it. And you're so cooperative with us,
No, my pleasure. Yeah.
But there's people that don't respond back, which you, like you said, it was not meant to be, and everything has its course.
Yeah. And look, and just because it doesn't happen today doesn't mean it's not going to happen tomorrow or the day after. And look, I have this, I don't call it a theory, but just observation of, like, when you really stop and look at, like, how complex and complicated the world in general can be, and then an individual's life, and then trying to, and then you factor in business considerations and other things, and then you try and get two people to align, let alone like two companies or two whatever. Like, I'm amazed anything gets done some days. Like, that literally anything can get done because it can be so chaotic. But then, you realize that you find these times and these opportunities to latch on and work together and come to some new creation or whatever the case may be. And it's like this, like, if I had been out of the country, for instance, well, it would have been a lot harder. But I want to say, thankfully, you caught me during a pandemic and there's no baseball games being played. And I really don't want to be out on my balcony right now because it's 105 degrees or whatever it is. So look, we made it work,
Right. We made it work. Meant to be. So for your voiceover, what was your first project that you did? And I'm trying to say the first project that pushed you forward. You're like, I could do this,
Oh boy. I think it really started when I want to say I was a junior in high school. And like I said, when I talked about never wanting to go into the media because of my mom being a newspaper editor, just because of the workload piece, and, we'll save all the other discussions for later. Like, I thought I was going to be an accountant or something. I loved math and I loved money. And I thought that was going to be, there's always a market for accountants and all that kind of stuff. And then my voice changed, and I thankfully went to a very athletically inclined and very small high school in Seattle. And my voice started changing. People were like, you got to do something with this. And thankfully I had a teacher who was our PA announcer for basketball, and then we had the football games on the radio. And I don't remember exactly who it was that suggested I talk to him, but I said, like, could I try doing games at some point? And he's like, yeah, like, we'll have you do JV basketball, and we'll have you like host the halftime show on the football game and do stats for us during the game. And so that was like, I was probably 16, ish at that time. And I think, like most people, and if seemingly if you agree with with what the statistics say, that public speaking is the number one feared activity, I don't know if in the US or the world, but certainly, people always talk about how like frightening public speaking can be. Well, like when you're 16 years old and you're giving yourself and you're given a microphone in front of a gymnasium full of basketball fans, that's going to either like reinforce your confidence really quickly or it's going to shatter it really quickly.
Right.
And I had a good teacher and a mentor who taught me a lot of stuff and got me off the ground and prepped me for it. And, so it was probably that. And then that led to doing it in college. And then with college, I was doing promos and whatever for the radio station I was managing at the time. And then just kind of, one thing leads to another. And then you get to, you just kind of keep taking those next steps. And, you certainly don't, I don't think you stop being nervous. And I think if you do stop being nervous, it probably means you've lost your passion for what you've done, because you should always not be afraid, but you should always be excited by the opportunity and present in the moment. And that doesn't matter if I'm doing a commercial or like yesterday morning, I was on the phone doing a voiceover session with some clients for a new national TV commercial. And like, I still have the same kind of, butterflies or whatever you want to call it as I do when I'm announcing a Phoenix Suns game or, getting to work a Phoenix Mercury game. And it's, the first game of the finals or whatever it may be. And you got an arena full of people who are cheering and losing their minds and all that stuff. So I think that was, long answer, but I think it was that early high school experience. And then everyone just kind of builds on to the next.
Yeah, I still feel that way. Even I don't play basketball anymore. Well, not competitively. Basketball in college, but that butterflies, or like you said, whatever you want to call it, it's always there. Podcasting, still there. I just enjoy doing it every time we hop on. So, and I tell my kids, I coach girls basketball in middle school.
Oh, nice.
I tell them all the time, like, if you're not nervous right now, if you are nervous right now, it's a good thing. That means you're excited. You want to be here. And
right.
I always talk about how nervous they are. Like, I'm nervous too. Coaching nervous, playing, it's all the same.
Yep. No, and like I said, if you lose that feeling of, and again, I think nervousness sometimes isn't necessarily the right word, but just if you don't feel that little tingle of the moment, then you're probably not loving what you do, and maybe go look for something that you do love. And that can be given a sales presentation, that can be pouring concrete, that can be, whatever it is. Just as I think as long as you have that nice kind of just tingle of being in the moment and getting to perform and do whatever it is that you do.
Man, I still get those every day, just doing something new. I'm just talking to clients and, speaking to them over the phone or online, emailing people, I still get the like, oh man, this is what I want to do. And especially podcasting, because this is brought to the world, so like people from so many other countries, are listening to me. So it gets me, like, can I okay, let's start doing this. And
absolutely,
it gets you in the flow. But I have friends that do PA as well. And they started just like you. They started, commentating they're like the JV or the basketball or the football or the soccer games, they just got the passion for it, and they just started doing it at a young age. And I feel like that's probably common for PA announcers, okay, if you like sports, you started commentating. Maybe the person wasn't good at, baseball, but like they were good with their skills of speech. And they're like enjoying it, throw some spice into it,
Absolutely. No, I had delusions of grandeur when I was in 8th grade going into my freshman year, thinking I was going to be playing basketball. And then like, I'm this 6-foot chubby white kid, and I show up and I've got, guys in my class that are 6'4" and like 4% body fat and just like, these ridiculously athletic 14-year-olds. And I was like, yeah, this might not be, my path to athletic success may not come on the court or on the field. So thankfully, like I said, I found a way to latch on and to stick with it. And, I've been blessed to be able to do that for, gosh, now 25 years in some capacity or another. So
was basketball your favorite sport growing up? Now you're into baseball, or did you always love baseball?
I would say I loved all sports when I was growing up pretty much. I came from a family that played a lot of golf. So I kind of grew up playing golf more than anything, but, and I think it sort of ebbed and flowed based on like who was good at the time. And so, there were a lot of lean years with the Mariners where they weren't really good. And then like they started to come around and that kind of reignited baseball for me. And then, basketball, like when the Sonics were good, then it was like all about basketball. And then the Sonics left and went to Oklahoma City. And I kind of went, I'm done with basketball for a while. And, fortunately managed to get a job with MLB, and that really reignited my love of the game. And, I certainly, I probably watch more games in a year just because of the work thing. So I don't always watch a lot of games just recreationally, but, I think when you kind of see the art and the beauty of a game and then understand sort of the narrative of what's going on, you can really get into anything. And so, like I'll flip on a soccer match every once in a while just to kind of see a different world. And then, has always been, ice hockey's always had a, kind of like third place in my sports heart, if you want to call it that. But like when you go to a game, there's nothing like seeing the speed and the force at which those guys move. And so I also work for, do the announcing for our indoor football league team here. So get to see a different manifestation of football, and that, when that's being played, that kind of reignites that, part of what I loved about football and what makes it fun to watch. So, but yeah, I think, I think I probably grew up more of a basketball fan than anything. And then it's definitely baseball has taken the lead, both because it pays me the most and, but I really do enjoy it. And I think it's a game that for me is suited to my personality and just kind of how I look at the world and can be critical about stuff.
So how did that opportunity with Major League Baseball like started with you? Were you given a tryout or were you given?
So I answered a Craigslist ad. That was literally I don't remember what the header of it was, but essentially the body said like, do you know how to score a baseball game and can you use a computer? If yes, email here. And I went like, okay, like, yeah, I know how to use a computer and I certainly know how to score a baseball game because I was doing the play-by-play for my college team for 2 years. And when you go to a mid-major conference school, you don't necessarily have like the biggest staff. So there's a lot of times where like our sports information director who did baseball would also then have to go cover some other spring sport, at the same day. So he knew he could trust me to like, keep the book. And when we were on the road, it was always the home team that kept the official record. We just kept a backup copy, but that got me into the idea of scoring a baseball game with a computer. And so I sent this email out, and the guy who ended up hiring me is now one of my best friends. And we started living in Phoenix, we have the Cactus League here in the spring. So they started sending me to spring training games because they're effectively exhibitions and you have to get stuff right, but it's a little lower pressure than a regular season game. And then so we have what are called stat stringers or data casters, and they're people that actually go to the games and they have a laptop and they code in all the action. And that's what ends up feeding MLB.com and ESPN and your phone if you play fantasy baseball and all this other stuff. So one of our guys who was one of our regular season guys ended up getting a scouting job with the Tampa Bay Rays. So they had an opening and they suggested I take it. And that was a couple of years ago. And then that let me do more games firsthand at a higher pressure. And then I got brought on to be a support staff person, which means I work from home now more than anything. And I watch games via TV and am overlooking the sort of what the person at the park is doing and making sure that their data is correct and it's getting to where it needs to be. And so that's for us who can, we look at games a lot differently because we're looking at it through the lens of code and through making sure that, what is on the computer is what is on the field. So, I've been doing that and just itching like crazy for the season to start up this year.
Where's your alma mater again?
University of San Francisco.
I used to know the mascot. It was the mascot of the San Francisco. No, I can't remember. Someone told me it was a trivia question, and one of my buddies told me it's like this is the mascot of, and I'm like, it's I thought it was the Golden Years, but nah, it's what? So what is the mascot?
Our nickname is the Dons.
The Dons. There you go. Yes.
So it's the term for a Spanish nobleman, and so our mascot is like is a masked guy with a big wide brimmed hat and a sword and all that kind of stuff. And what's funny is that so in our conference, which is the West Coast Conference, we have the University of San Diego, which is the Toreros, which are the bullfighters, and then St. Mary's College, which is the Gales, which is kind of like I think a French nobleman warrior kind of thing. And then adjacent to us is Sonoma State, and they're the Cossacks, which is a Russian nobleman fighter kind of thing. And so you had like all these schools that basically had the same sort of general idea of a mascot, except in different cultures.
Multicultural.
Is that the same conference as Gonzaga? No, you said.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So the West Coast is Gonzaga, University of Portland, San Francisco, St. Mary's, Santa Clara, Loyola Marymount, University of San Diego, Pepperdine, and now includes University of the Pacific, and BYU for some sports. It expanded out to 10 schools, and when I was there, it was 8. So Pacific and BYU came in after I had left. But yeah, Gonzaga started to get good. Like my freshman year, we went to the tournament. Men's basketball went to the tournament, and then Gonzaga got really good, and that was, 25 years ago, and they haven't seemingly looked back. So. Yeah, that is truer than you think, especially when you actually have to play them. And we've actually managed to play them pretty well, but they are a phenomenal juggernaut. And what's really crazy is like, I remember going to Gonzaga before they were good. And then I went sort of after they were established as like a perennial team. And it was like every building on campus was new or had a new paint job. It's like basketball, like remade that campus in like 3 years, at least from what I remember seeing of it. So. Yeah, they're incredible.
Speaking of, man, back I know they're starting to play players now, but back then they weren't. And like you said, basketball built that school. How you feel about that? Working in the sports world, kind of on the other side. Now, I'm an athlete, so you're on the other side of things. How you feel about that? How do you feel when you're in college? How you feel about now? The kids now starting to play, but what you thought about them not getting paid?
Well, I mean, look, I think, there's a certain level of discrepancy that exists when you look at the big time programs that bring in a ton of money to a university, and that really, can move the needle. I mean, the thing that I always remember hearing about Gonzaga, in addition to the buildings thing, was that when they started getting good, like the number of applications they were getting was like tripling or quadrupling for the incoming freshman class. Which naturally, if you kind of take a bell curve, is going to give you more higher end high school students to select from. And in theory are going to, nudge your graduation numbers up. And then in theory, hopefully will return, alumni donations for the next 50 years. So, it's tough. And I like the notion of amateur athletes, and like in golf, that's a really big thing. It's in the rule book about how you can be disqualified if you're not an amateur. But at the same time, then you just see what the revenue is. And then, you factor in video games and you factor in all this other stuff. And it makes it really hard to think that and let's just use the word compensation for being a student athlete, like that the compensation is fair and equitable. So, I mean, is the answer to pay him? I don't necessarily know. Maybe. But it's hard to ignore the inequities that exist in some of those programs.
Yes. And But like, but I was telling Q and our friends that play basketball and the ACC, I told them, guys, if you were not playing the ACC, nobody would have watched you at all. If you go to the West Coast or, Midwest, nobody sees you. If you play basketball in the ACC, where it's the main basketball schools at, you're being watched, by ESPN and all Sports Center. But like, not every school can afford playing their players.
Oh, no, absolutely. And again, like, when you open that up to all collegiate athletes, I certainly think there's, the simple reality of it from an economic standpoint. I kind of hate to use this sometimes, but, there's a lot of difference between, a star quarterback at, Alabama or LSU or, pick your power school or whatever you want to call it. And then like a beach volleyball player at, Northern Arizona University. You're talking two different dynamics and two different revenue streams. And look, I mean, the simple thing is that the majority of programs are not profitable short of, men's football and men's basketball. And even that's not terribly consistent. So it's tough. I mean, and, certainly as an athlete, I think you want to push yourself to the highest level you can and see where it goes. And look, if you're afforded that opportunity, that's a blessing in and of itself. Yet at the same time, like I said, it's hard to ignore the discrepancy that exists for some athletes and the programs that they are helping to raise, and programs and institutions that they're helping essentially to raise money for. And let's be honest, you get to some of the bigger schools, and I think that the term student athlete sometimes is not accurate. And if anything is, you're an athlete student.
Honestly, I went to a mid-major. I went to the Citadel. And
okay.
Who was an athlete student? I mean, that's why, I have a problem with it not getting paid, just because I put so much work in, for
sure.
School. And like, we weren't that profitable, like you said. We went mid-major. We're small. We're military college. Not many people want to come. So, and I do understand from that standpoint, but, I thought some type of compensation, like you were saying, would have been nice. My body hurts enough.
Oh, no, believe me, I have, cousins that played collegiately, and I can tell you that, I came from a family of catchers, and, one of them played for a couple of years in the minors and the other didn't. And, I'm sure that their knees hurt on more occasions throughout the week than I'd like to have as part of my life.
Right. It's a different thing, once you college, and if you're at that, at that level, I feel like you get it for school for free, you can, you're getting hooked up, you're getting free meals, you're getting free equipment, you're getting free sneakers, you can get a compensation, but not like, it's not a full-time job, you're still going to school,
Full-time job. It is.
Yeah, I was going to say, I bet you there's a few people who are listening to this who would disagree with a full-time job.
Yeah, it is a full-time job, but it's not like you're playing like NFL, NBA, full regular season, and school, just how long is the season going?
The basketball season is from November to March. That's, basketball.
But that's just the season, though.
Yeah, it's just the season. We got preseason. We got summer. We got all this kind of stuff. We're here.
I would say, because I'm sure they didn't lock you out of the weight room once the season ended.
Oh, no. We had to go in there. It was over. Like, you get 1 week off and we're back at it.
Oh, trust me, I know. I played college soccer, too, and, for us, nobody went to our games. I played App State, and nobody went to our games. Only our moms and dads, but, so I didn't get compensated at all. So, like, not even, like, we can't even get snacks on the bus, man. We can't even afford a snack. So I'm like, come on, man.
No, it's, and I think the part of the thing is that, there's obviously a lot of love that goes into being an athlete of high caliber, and that you want to, flesh out every ounce of potential that you have in you. But at the same time, though, there's a life reality that comes in as well. And I can only speak to the baseball side of it. I think in the NCAA, you're allowed like 30 or it's either 30 or 35 rostered players. I want to say it's 30, but like a baseball team only has something like 11 and a half full scholarships to award. So, you see these guys. I had a friend in college who was really smart. He was like a double biochemistry major, one of these guys. And I think he was recruited, but I don't think he got much, if any, of a baseball scholarship. And, he played on a regular basis. So it's like, you really are taking on a lot of commitment for yourself. And, we can argue the whys of that. Some people legitimately want to get to the majors, or at least get if nothing less, a lot of guys just want to get as far as they can go, because I think one of the worst things to do is to have that fear of being 35 or 40 years old and go, man, I don't know how far I could have gotten. Like I hung it up at this point, and kind of we were talking about earlier, if you'd have taken that extra ground ball, or you'd have, sent that extra scouting tape to somebody or whatever, like maybe you would have made it to the minors. I don't know. And then once you make to that next step, then who knows what could come after that, because, somebody gets injured and you get more playing time, or you meet up with the right coach or whatever. But, again, I think a lot of it is just not wanting to have let your potential run its full course. And then you can sort of walk away, and I think it'll be a little bit happier, and at least a little bit more content that, you put everything you thought you had into it.
Right. Yeah. As an athlete, you want to give it all, but once that age hit, you start thinking about family, and do you want to create a family and all that? And that comes to a mind, you could be, I told all my friends that, that's still playing right now. I'm like, dude, if you're 23, 24, 25, and you're not married, keep going, keep trying, trying. But once you have like a kid already, and a wife, it's harder, and then I think, I believe that's the right time to double think everything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's like, there's a lot of guys that go back for that extra year to either make a little, because they know the money's good and they can still make it. But look, everything comes with with opportunity cost at the same time. So, if it's the right equation for you, by all means, do it, enjoy it. But, if you feel like it's not, then there's plenty of other things to fill your time with and fill your enjoyment with.
That's dope. That's dope. And for Patrick, for Halfwheel, right? How many cigars do you guys receive a month from this company? Like, how many do you guys receive? And you got to try them out.
Yeah. So in the earlier days of Halfwheel, we probably took in more samples, and I don't necessarily know if I could give you a really accurate number, because it varies, week to week, month to month. But what I can tell you that right now, we buy about 70 to 75% of everything that we smoke. And, I can tell you that our budget we spend more on cigars than I thought we would ever make. So, we kind of went through a process, and this came out of trade shows and stuff like that, where we'd get a lot of samples, and then, like we'd smoke them, and somebody would say like, well, why did you smoke that? That was a show sample. That wasn't supposed to be reviewed. And we just kind of got tired of it. And what we wanted to say is we wanted to give, the readers as honest of an experience as they might have when going out and buying a cigar. So that's led us to buying the majority of what we smoke for the site. Even if a company sends us something, like we'll still go to the shop and buy, 5 of them. And that's why all of our reviews are 3 samples, so we can get an idea for consistency and say, look, this is a really good cigar, but I had 3 noticeably different experiences with it. So I enjoyed this experience more than that. And I hope you get that experience, but be mindful that you might not. Or, I had 3 samples of this, and they were all, it was like watching somebody play the exact same piece of music note for note. And it was like, you couldn't tell the difference between the 3. And so for us, consistency is a really big thing. So that's why we smoke multiple samples. So to answer the question, I don't necessarily know if I give you a number. It's certainly more than we can usually accommodate, but that's, again, a factor of time, and the fact that we want to get out and buy more cigars for the reviews more than anything.
So besides consistency, what else are you looking for in a cigar? What makes it something that you want to write about, that you want to get other people that read your writings to smoke the same one you do?
Yeah, so we're necessarily not we're not trying to I want to think how to phrase this, like we're looking for things that are current, because part of our overarching goal has to be that we have to have cigars that feed into our Cigar of the Year award at the end of the year. So our universe is basically cigars that were released, and it fluctuates a little bit, but kind of mid-November until the following year's mid-November. So that when we say that, we're going to give out the 2020 Cigar of the Year award, we actually want it to be a cigar that came out in 2020 or close to. And certainly that's why we nudge it back to kind of November, because sometimes it's, it may not show up on a store shelf until the end of November. And then by the time we get it photographed and smoked, and then if it qualifies, we have to send it to the other people for them to smoke. Like, it creates this real logjam of work at the end of the year, which is already hectic enough as it is for a number of reasons. And, our big thing is, like, we don't, like, if we smoke a cigar and we can sort of get a sense it's not going to score well, we don't stop the review. Like, we're not sitting here trying to just give everyone 90s and 92s. It's like, if we get a cigar and it's bad, we're going to smoke the other two of them, and that cigar may get a 65. And that's just the nature of the beast, because we collectively tend to take the approach of, sites like Wirecutter or Consumer Reports or whatever. Like, I don't necessarily want to know just what's good. I want to know, like, what isn't good. And that doesn't always win us a lot of friends with people in the industry, but once they got used to it, they at least saw that we were consistent about it and we weren't playing favorites with anybody. So, in that regard, we look for things that are new to fill into the Cigar of the Year thing. It also doesn't do us a lot of good to be the 12th or 15th or 50th person to review a cigar that's been on the market for 10 years, because that's not going to help us in search, and that's not going to help us in really anything. Because look, there are some cigars that everybody more or less has smoked at one time or another in their life, and they know what it is. And it's a really good cigar, and that's why it's been on the market for 10 years, and you don't need us to tell you that. Certainly when we were starting out, our whole goal was to be the first person or the first site to review a cigar. And, there is a reality that says that there are certain companies that do generate more interest and more traffic amongst our readership and people who tend to look to online reviews. And so we would make efforts to review those. But at the same time, we didn't want to be the site that just reviewed cigars from like 5 companies. We wanted to show what the entire industry had to offer. So whether that's, a new release from a big major manufacturer with a big, with a fancy established name that's going to be in every retail shop, or it's a single store exclusive and they made 100 boxes of 10. Like, we want to cover that gamut, because that's what our readers are doing when they're out smoking cigars.
Right. And for your Cigar of the Year, do you include Cubans, or do you have 2 lists, like a Cuban and a non-Cuban?
No, we have one list, and this is something that I always, whenever I talk about Cigar of the Year lists with people, I always like to remind them that when you're looking at a list, you always have to first take into account what a particular site or reviewer's universe is. And what I mean by that is that no one can review every cigar that comes out over the course of a year. There were years in the last decade where, we keep track of every new cigar that comes out, and we'd have a list of like 15 or 1,800 cigars. So if you just do the math, and let's just use 1,800 as a sort of high end, but whatever, you're talking smoking 5 to 6 cigars a day, every day for a year. And if you figure that an average cigar takes 2 hours or an hour and a half, well, in an hour and a half, you're already 7.5 hours in, and that's with no writing time. That's with no photography. That's with no editing. That's with nothing other than just the smoking. And so, you have to always understand what that list universe is. Some people will review cigars that have been out in the market for 5 years. Some people like us generally don't, other than the occasional review of something rare or, like an edition regional from Cuba that we managed to find somewhere. And we just wanted to break up the flow of reviews because Cubans do have interest amongst our readers. So for us, it's like I say, it's pretty much stuff that's been out within the last calendar year ish. And we don't discriminate against like single store exclusives versus widespread releases. We had a cigar that was, 3 years ago now. It was a Casada Reserva Privada Barber Pole in a Corona Gorda size. That was an exclusive to a retailer out here in the Phoenix area. That was our cigar of the year. You could only get it at one shop and it was a limited production. Another year it was the Davidoff Oro Blanco, which is $500. And like some people will say, well, we don't, like, I can't afford a cigar that's $500. And we get that. But like, we wanted to review it because number one, we knew we'd probably be the only site to do so. And we really wanted to see like, what does a $500 cigar taste like? And that's $500 before taxes, by the way.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, and that's sort of the makeup of what our universe is. But no, we don't run like a Cuban versus non-Cuban list because look, the simple reality is if you put in 5 minutes of legwork, any American can get his or her hands on Cubans without too much headache. And depending on who you ask, there was a time where Cuba was saying they were making about 80 million cigars a year, and they estimated that upwards of half of them ended up being smoked by Americans.
Yes. Trust me, I could tell you 3 websites right now that I could give out for Cuban cigar. Yeah.
Well, and you could have those. I mean, the shipping right now is a little off because of the pandemic and whatnot. But look, it wasn't that long ago where you could place an order today and have it on your doorstep in 10 days.
Yes,
if not sooner, depending on how much you're willing to pay and where it's coming from. So, yeah, I mean, we don't discriminate in that regard as far as maintaining like a separate list for Cubans. Because again, the other thing too is like we're not going to go out and review a Monte Cristo number 2 because there's already 100 Monte Cristo number 2 reviews out there, and that doesn't do us a lot of good.
That's right. Yeah, you could just type it in YouTube and you get 20 people ready. At this front porch with some bad lighting and reviewing that cigar. So have you guys tried, reviewing, I just thought about this right now, the, Gurkha, His Majesty's Honor,
His Majesty's Reserve?
Reserve, yes.
Yes. Brooks actually reviewed that. I'm going to look this up really quick because I want to make sure I get the, time right.
So
I did review that.
I seen it live. I seen it like cigar, at a lounge, and I'm like, yeah, it's not worth it though. It's like Brooks
reviewed it in July of 2009, and that was actually before Halfwheel, and that's when he had his own site called Smoking Stogie. But when we merged the sites together, we brought all those reviews together. So yeah, it's been, like I say, 11 years now since that was reviewed, but yes, we did. There is a now Halfwheel review of the Gurkha His Majesty's Reserve.
And what was Brooks's final thesis about it? What was his final thoughts about the cigar?
Do you want me to? I'll read you his final thought, and then I'll tell you the score. I'll let you guess the score.
Okay.
So his final summary was: this stick would have been an okay $6 cigar. As it is, I would call it overpriced, overhyped, boring, bitter crap. Not exactly a surprise, but I was really hoping that it would shock me. The only redeeming quality of the cigar was that it stood up for the final photo without falling over. Would you care to guess what he gave it on a scale of 100?
Okay. Q, you go first.
I gotta say a 40 or something like that.
I gave 55.
55, exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
That sounded horrible. I thought it was gonna be less than 50.
Wow, good thing I didn't buy that night when I was having some few drinks on.
It's sort of tough to, like, there are some scores, like every cigar can get a certain score, and we've revised and we've polished our scoring system over the years. But, there are some numbers that are sort of hard to get to, and 55 is kind of one of them. But, yeah, no, I mean, it happened, and that was, I have not smoked one myself. At least I don't remember smoking it, so I can't speak to it personally, but needless to say, Brooks was not impressed by it.
Right. So what does your scores consist of? Like, what does a cigar have to do to get a 90 or 95?
So we use a score sheet that we developed. Oh God, I think the last real revision to it was probably 2015 because I think we kind of ironed out all the categories we wanted. And so, it starts off with an appearance question. Basically, would you buy it? Like, does it look like it belongs on a store shelf? And that's sort of like you get 1 point for putting your name on the test kind of thing. And then we have a flavor scale, which ranges, there's 20 options. And then we have and they're all broken down to into the thirds of a cigar. So you get one number for the first third, another for the second third, and one for the final third. And then construction is basically a 0 to 4 or 0 to 3. Choices. Burn is one of 3 options. Smoke production is one of 2 options. And then balance is, one of 12 options. And then the interesting thing with that though is that, so we total those up and our scores don't, I cannot on my score sheet give a cigar 100 because there's not 100 points on the sheet. So what we decided is that because we wanted to make the reviews as even as possible, regardless of who is reviewing it. So we started to use all the cigars that we smoke for Cigar of the Year, because those are really the only ones that we are all smoking and scoring. And we sort of come up with a multiplier that our sheet gets multiplied by, and that's what ends up giving it the final score. And that's basically to sort of neutralize anyone who is maybe consistently, a point or two tougher than the other two, or a point or two more generous than the other two. So when I'm doing a review, I can only knowingly give a cigar one of 2 scores, which is 0 or 100. And needless to say, I haven't done either one of them. But when I submit my score sheet, I don't know what the score is going to be because I don't know what my current multiple is compared to Charlie and Brooks.
Right.
So like when a review shows up, like unless because Charlie basically does the editing of my reviews and I do the editing of his, and then Brooks sort of goes mainly to Charlie. I get one every once in a while, but the only time it ever comes up that I might know what a score is before it gets published and vice versa is if let's say Charlie's reading my review and he goes, man, your words don't match the number in one way or the other. Like, I was reading your review and you had me thinking this thing was going to be a 94 and it showed up at, an 84 because we all know how each other writes and we know what we look for and stuff like that. And then vice versa. He's like, man, you didn't really have much nice to say about it, or at least not 94-esque words in the review. And yet that's what it's going to get. So you might want to go back and just make sure that your words match up with your score. But other than that, like I submit a review, I have no idea what it's going to get until it actually comes out.
Wow, that's more complex than I thought it was. I thought it was like, I'm gonna smoke this 1/3, first, second, third. I give her an 80.
Well, and truthfully, there were years where that was our model, and what we ended up finding was that you sort of played this game of, comparing it to the last 2 cigars you smoked, and you said, well, shoot, if I gave cigar X 88. Well, this is a little bit better than cigar Y is a little bit better than that. So like, is it 89 or is it 90 or is it what? And so what we finally said is like, when you're smoking and you're doing your review, like you shouldn't think about the number because then you start to target your writing and you start focusing on the cigar in the context of that number. So we just said, look, we know, and again, we want consistency across the 3 of us. So in theory that, that a cigar, whoever the cigar falls to in terms of who's doing the review shouldn't matter because the score should be within a point of each other, because we all sort of know our tendencies. And look, we can say we all smoked the same cigar and one of us gave it a 90 and one of us gave it an 88 and one of us gave it an 86. Well, that means that across the 3 of us, the average was an 88. And if we keep seeing that, then you start to figure out kind of what your deviation is from what the average person would give it. So yeah, we just decided, like, let's just take the idea of worrying about a score out of the equation while the person's writing it, or conversely, trying to grasp a number. It's once the review is done, and let's just focus on the qualities that we agree matter and score it within that range, and then multiply it by whatever the individual's number is to get the final number. And we think the results have actually worked out pretty well. It's seemingly given us a lot better. It's given us a lot better spread in terms of our numbers. We agree with each other a lot more, because there were times where, Charlie would see a review of mine or vice versa, or Brooks, or whoever. And like, we text one another and be like, how in the hell did you give that thing a 93? Like, that thing is nowhere close to that, like, not saying it was a 92, but like, I had an 85 experience with that thing, because it may have been something new that we all just happened to pick up or whatever. And so we just, like I said, we moved to this idea of trying to get away from having the score be front and center and having it sort of be the afterthought to the review process.
Right. I think the way you guys have it right now is a good way to, spread out the even scores and, not just giving an answer just for giving one. And, I think that's fair for the whole cigar market. Like, this is our process, and it's not just I'm biased to this brand. And it's good that you guys do that. So you traveled and you've seen how the cigar culture has risen in America.
Mm-hmm.
How different is it from the late 90s to now? How's the cigar culture in America rising, or is it decreased, or it's been changing to the vape now, or what have you seen?
Well, I mean, I got into the cigar industry after what was known collectively as the boom of the mid 90s, where you'd hear these stories about people showing up to Ernesto Perez Carrillo's factory in Miami with suitcases so they could just buy up every cigar they wanted. So I can only really speak to probably the last 10 or 12 years in terms of having kept a critical eye on things. I think certainly the number of cigars that are on the market just grew exponentially. And that was in large part to companies, I think, trying to answer the question, well, what's new? Because from what I've read and people I've talked to who are older than I am, you go back 30, 40 years, it's like you didn't bounce around from brand to brand. Like, if you smoked Romeo and Julieta Churchills, like, that's what you smoked. Like, that was your cigar. Now you talk to some retailers, and then really in the last, 8-10 years, it's not about like buying boxes anymore. Like, you may get a guy that still buys 10 cigars, but he's buying 10 singles as opposed to buying his 20 count box for the month or whatever. So then you go on and you say, well, certainly as we're learning more technologically, and tobacco and cigars doesn't necessarily seem like a technological thing, but when you get to the agricultural side, I think it certainly is. And we've seen companies like CLE working with Bayer for crop sciences, and to take a lot more in tune approach with fertilization and irrigation and things like that. And so you're getting better quality tobaccos, and certainly tobaccos are evolving because you have agronomists who are working on hybridization and growing techniques and gathering more data points and being able to process those data points differently through computing and through, just everything else. So, I mean, in that regard, yeah, you definitely see some changes. And then when you get down to the consumer level, I really think it depends on sort of where you are in the country from a cultural standpoint, because, you've got one of the biggest things is, with 50 states, you have like 45 different tax situations, meaning that, states charge different taxes on cigars. And so, I may be paying 22 cents in excise tax on my cigar in Arizona, whereas somebody who's in Colorado is paying 40% of the wholesale price. So that cigar is significantly more expensive, and that may limit either what they're smoking or how much they're smoking, or whatever the case may be. And then you have smoking bans, and you can just kind of go down the list to find where places are more hospitable and where some places aren't, and on and on and on and on. So, I really think it's a broad question to ask, and it's a tough one to answer. The other half of it too is I don't necessarily know if the number of cigar smokers in the country is growing on the whole. I'm sort of inclined to think it's probably holding fairly steady. I don't know if it's necessarily dropping, but it's, I don't necessarily see the days where we're going to have 10% of the population self-identifying as a regular cigar smoker, meaning they have one or two a month.
Right. And I do see it. The cigar smoking community, slowing, maybe I think it's slowing down, or it's still rising, but not at that level as, I was told before, like, at one point, everybody want to smoke cigars, everybody want to be like, look like with the 3-piece suit and trying to flex on cigar. Now, like, people, like, cigars, literally grandpa smokes cigars, and I'm like, nah, man, I smoke cigars,
Right.
But yeah, I just don't see the new generation of, 21 and older now smoking cigars. They're like, nah, man, I got enough time for that. Let me smoke this Juul.
Yeah. And look, and there's certainly some, there's different realities that existed. I mean, you can go back and, even just you look at like television, it wasn't super uncommon to have a main character who smoked cigars on a network TV show. And then, you had Arnold Schwarzenegger and Michael Jordan. I don't know if you guys watched The Last Dance on ESPN. It was, the 10-part show about Jordan and the Bulls in 96. Like, they were all smoking cigars, like, in the locker room and in, effectively plain sight. And I don't think you see that much anymore. And there's a number of reasons for that. And there's, different alternatives, and there's different, like I said, there's, vaping has become a thing for some people. I don't know if it's, it hasn't garnered mainstream attention in the sense of like television, stuff like that. But then societal attitudes just change too. And, what people seem to value or seem to want to spend their time and their money on evolves. So yeah, it's definitely different than it was in the mid 90s and the immediate years after that. And again, I think about, when I was an intern and they'd send me over to this martini bar that sold cigars, and you could smoke cigars in the bar. Well, now, like in Washington State, not only can you not smoke in bars, period, like you can't smoke in cigar shops, and you can't smoke within 25 feet of a cigar shop. The only exception being if you're on a Native American reservation, which if you're in downtown Seattle is a 40 to 60 minute drive to get to, at least the last time I was there. So, there's all these cultural factors that are at play that certainly affect those things. And it's one of the things I like about being in Phoenix is that the cigar culture still exists because you have low taxes, really nice weather for the most part, and a lot of shops where you can enjoy a cigar, and a good number of those even have a bar in them so you can have a drink with your cigar as well.
Right. It all depends where the person is located, like say Washington, you can smoke, 25 feet from cigar shop. Like I've heard, like you can't even smoke like in your front porch no more. You can only smoke in your backyard. I'm like, in some state, I can't remember which state it was, but like you can't even smoke like, in the streets no more. Like you just see people smoking on downtown, like in the benches or
right
on a park. Now they're like, they will ticket you, they're like, here's a ticket for smoking outside the park. I'm like, come on, man. Like, what am I doing wrong?
Welcome to 2020, man. Look, we've got one of the things that we're seeing is that, you're seeing communal housing bans or communal housing smoking bans. So like, a lot of apartments are becoming smoke free. I can tell you, like, downtown Phoenix has had an absolute explosion of apartment buildings in the last couple of years. And I don't know what the exact number is, but it seems like a majority of them are completely smoke free. And then, you have cities that are putting in park smoking bans. And for a lot of them, and this is where I think Halfwheel does a really good job as far as the legislation side of it, is explaining that, like, a lot of these legislators, and this is not a knock, it's just, from what I would say, it's honesty. Like, they're not terribly creative when it comes to writing their own bills. So, they say, well, we want to be a healthy community, which is great. Like, and I fully support that. And I think cigarette butt litter is disgusting and it mucks up our waterways and all this other stuff. But they'll say like, all of our parks are now going to be smoke free. Well, okay. Like, that's great. I don't want people smoking cigarettes around the swing sets, but like, if I'm out in the middle of nowhere and, or in a big city park and there's nobody bothering me and I'm not bothering anybody, like, it's really that big of a crime to light up a cigar and enjoy nature that way? Well, right. Some people think it is. And, that's where, not to soapbox a little bit, but like, if you're listening to this show, stay in touch with what's going on in your city and county government, because that's where those changes are made. And it's not like they're hiding it. They have to publish agendas of what's coming up on this week's meeting. And that's where you have your voice heard. And, it's a lot easier to try and prevent something from happening than it is to undo it once it has happened. And look, the simple reality too is like, there's just not a lot of sympathy for tobacco users in general in this current day and age. Specifically if you're in states that don't have any sort of like, cigar heritage like Florida does, or like Pennsylvania or Connecticut has, and stuff like that. There's just not a lot of sympathy. And I don't think a lot of politicians who are looking to get reelected are going to stake their claim to saying, I defended, the 10% of the population that's a smoker, as opposed to the 90% who at least say they want, they don't like smoking, or whatever the number is. They may not think that there should be a complete ban on it, but, and then you go down the other road, which is there are cities in California right now who have completely banned tobacco sales, like completely.
Right. So
it's a changing and evolving time.
Like CVS took all tobacco out of the stores.
Mm-hmm. And I struggle with that because, look, should you be selling tobacco products in a pharmacy or a store that prides itself on health? Probably not. Like, that's sort of a conflicting message. Yet at the same time, like, if we're going to take tobacco out, like, let's take Snickers bars and let's take Coca-Cola and let's take, all this other stuff and just truly make it a health store. Right. But, the tobacco industry doesn't have quite the same pull or the same appeal as, junk food and soda.
I totally agree with you.
So what, one of the last questions I'm going to ask is, what are some of the FDA's regulations on cigars? We talked about it. FDA is a federal thing. So
right. Yeah. So, and I mean, really the big thing that is going to be coming up, and, if people want to read more about it, I'd certainly, because it is a really hard topic to sort of dive into, at a surface level. But, back in 2009, Congress approved a piece of legislation that allowed the FDA to regulate tobacco products. And for a long time, it was pretty much just cigarettes, which is understandable. And then as e-cigarettes started to become more prevalent and had zero regulation on them and were causing some legitimate health concerns, and certainly were being marketed in ways that were maybe not completely true and in line with what they actually do to the human body, cigars started to get some attention as well, because they said, well, we should regulate. I mean, we're being tasked with regulating everything. So, we should be regulating cigars. So in terms of like where things are at now, it's, we're coming up on a deadline of, I want to make sure I get this date right. I want to say September 9th, although forgive me if that's wrong, because I don't do as much FDA writing as I probably should be. So I'm trying to look it up really quick without sounding like I'm looking it up. But the next thing you're going to go through is what is called a substantial equivalence testing. And so because as part of the law and the way that the laws were written, products that were on the market prior to the FDA began to regulate things do not have to get tested, because you can't necessarily retroactively take a product off the market. But what that does mean is that cigars that were on the market after that point do have to go through a number of options for approval by the FDA to stay on the market. And the most of those are going to be through what's called substantial equivalence, which is saying, look, our product, which came out in 2012, is substantially equivalent from its harm, risk, and other things to products that are already on the market. And that's going to be the big thing. Now, if that doesn't happen for a particular product, then it can risk being forced to be pulled off the market. And that could happen because a company chooses not to pursue substantial equivalence for it because it is expensive. Testing is insanely expensive. And I don't even know if we have a hard number on what the actual end cost to a company is going to be, but they have to submit testing reports for like every size of a line. So if you have a cigar line with 5 sizes, you have to submit 5 different reports. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what all comes out of that and how that's going to affect the market over the next 2 to 3 years. And certainly, I don't want to say the pandemic is probably not going to help, but I can't imagine it's going to help. And it may even be detrimental depending on, if companies are losing revenue and how quickly they can kind of get back to normal and fund these kind of things. So that's really where all eyes are as far as, we're concerned. Certainly the FDA is going to start enforcing the 21-year-old tobacco minimum purchasing age, which was signed into law by the president in December. And they have to go through some legal governmental hoops and whatnot to get to that point. But then you're going to see that, at a federal level, the minimum age is going to be 21 to purchase tobacco products. And that won't necessarily affect the cigar industry too terribly, but it'll affect vaping and cigarettes probably a lot more substantially. But, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where things are at. So like I said, the deadline is September 9th, 2020 to get the substantial equivalence or grandfather status into the FDA. As long as it's in, they can keep selling it until the FDA rules on it. And how long that could be is anybody's guess at this point. But, it could certainly mean that some cigars won't show up on them, won't be around, or, it'll probably slow down the release of new cigars. It's like anything, when it comes to laws and government and how people interpret it and how courts decide to rule on it, there's always some variability in terms of what the real world effects look like.
Right. Yeah. Like, actually, I had a conversation with a mutual friend, Jeff Mandola, and he told me about it. Like, he's like, man, like, I just sent samples of every size of the cigars that I got sent by through this deadline, and I make sure which cigars I'm gonna produce for this year. And I'm like, it's like back then I was like a couple years ago, I just did every cigar I want, Now it's like FDA is doing this, and then they could slow me down, or they could ask for this and that's for that, and it's just you have to read your laws, like you said, and you just gotta be connected of what's happening around you.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And it's certainly, I mean, look, if you wanted to get into the cigar business, in the last couple of years, it's probably the worst time you could have ever done it. And certainly cigars are, there's some people that have done really well in it. Like any business, there's a lot of people that didn't do terribly well in it and sunk a lot of money into it and are now out of business. But the hurdles that that come with FDA regulation are certainly a pretty significant barrier to entry. And look, I mean, that's just the reality of working in tobacco, because look, tobacco is a product that causes harm, and there are certainly a number of products that are way more harmful that are, than cigars are, but that unfortunately we kind of get lumped all into that same group by some people who are out in the world. And, the other half of the thing you have to remember is that, there are some very powerful, very influential, very vocal people who will not rest until every tobacco plant is wiped off the face of the earth, because they hate tobacco that much. So that creates a whole another dynamic that's at play here. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of, really next, I would say 2 to 5 years. And it really depends on how fast FDA is able to get through their applications and if people are meeting the testing requirements and stuff like that, which, like I say, in the world of government, sometimes it seems like there's always, unforeseen obstacles and lawsuits and then interpretations and stuff like that. So it'll be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, and with this FDA going on now, all the cigar manufacturers are rising the prices. You know, I've heard like Arturo Fuentes like upping $1 or two now to every cigar now, starting this year. I think it was. I like and people because people can't they gotta go through more federal stuff now to bring it into them to the states.
Yeah, no, it's definitely added some end cost to the user. And, it's, I know nobody likes to see a price increase. I mean, I certainly don't when it comes to whatever it may be. But, cigars are no different. I mean, you have labor costs, you have raw material costs, you have utilities costs, transportation costs, materials, like I said, and then now you have FDA compliance costs. And unfortunately, the Fuente family wants to eat just like the rest of us. And so they got to make sure they're making a profit on their cigars. And that unfortunately results in a higher cost for the end user. And it's not fun. And I hope that, it ends up being at least palatable for the majority of people. But yeah, I definitely think, you might see some adjustments in the market as to who's buying what and sort of where the sweet spot and the price, on the price scale starts to come in for a lot of people.
That's right.
So what is your choice cigar? What are you going to choose on a night, man? You got off work. Oh, yeah, well, I guess you're getting off. But
yeah, I was just saying.
You're done working and you're at home, nighttime. What you going to pick up?
Man, it's really, it varies so much day to day. I sort of I'm at that point where I just like smoking something I haven't smoked before. And that
I'm with you,
cause I love getting experience and I love trying new things. And, I'm fortunate in that occasionally I'll get access to test blends or single, like a little Perito of a single type of tobacco. And those are really fun for me to dive into and explore. And thankfully, there are so many good cigars on the market these days that it's really tough to pick one. And like I say, you can go into pretty much any humidor that's worth its salt and find an abundance of choices. And, yeah, it's really, it's super tough for me to pick, cause again, like it really just depends on the mood and time. I mean, there's days I wake up and I just want something super mild and creamy to go with a latte or an espresso or something like that. And then there's other days where it's like, not that I necessarily like want I've kind of shied away from a lot of nicotine strength as I've gotten a little bit older because getting woozy from too much nicotine isn't as fun as it used to be when I was a little younger. But, it really just kind of depends on the day and the time and sort of where I'm at. I always tell people too that like, and this is not a story that I made up. This comes from guy by the name of Jose Blanco, who's been in the cigar industry forever, is working for Fuente now, if I'm not mistaken, and was with La Aurora for many, many years and worked with Ernesto Perez Carrillo and Hoy de Nicaragua and other people I'm sure I'm leaving out. But, he always had this statement of like, rule number one is that the surefire way to ruin any cigar is to smoke it next to an asshole. And so like, there's that. And then the corollary to that was like, it really just depends on sort of your mindset. Like you can be having the greatest day in the world. You closed a deal at work or the girl that you asked out said yes, or you found out you're having a kid or whatever, whatever your happy day is. Right. And I can give you pretty much any cigar and it's going to taste like heaven. And then the flip side of that is that like, you can have a miserable day at work and, something, whatever's not right at home. And like, I can give you the rarest unicorn cigar in the world. And if your mind's not in it, like it's not going to have any flavor to it. So it's, a lot of it's just subjective, but I don't know. There's just, like I said, there's way too many great options right now. And thankfully it means I can have my sort of choice of what I want to smoke at any given moment.
Yes. I'm in the same boat as you right now. I have, when I started smoking cigars, some more of a Fuente, then, Romeo Julieta. And then I went to, I think it was Monte Cristo. But after that time, I decided to like, hold on, there's too many cigars to try, and I'm gonna smoke and one cigar. Every time I'm available to smoke a cigar, I'm gonna try something new because you never know what you might like.
Absolutely.
Like I tried the new Avos, the new line they brought up, or the new not Perdomos. It was the uh Alma Fuerte. It's the
Placencia.
Placencia. That new lineup. It's amazing.
Yep.
I tried all that line. So if I stick to one cigar only, look, I just named you two cigar brands that are killing it. Anything that AJ pulls out right now is good. Anything. I just tried out the new Romeo and Julieta by him, the blue band one. It's a good stick. I like the New Worlds. The New Worlds Cameroons are amazing for the price. It's an everyday stick.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. I have a friend that's just getting into smoking cigars, and we were walking around a shop maybe 2 weeks ago, and I said, like, look, you're still in the in the developmental stage where you need to smoke like the standards. Like understand why this cigar has been on the market for 10 years and sells incredibly well. And I remember turning him on to something, and he texted me like the next day and he said, man, like you were right. Like that is a phenomenal cigar. And I went, yeah, that's one of those ones that I can pretty much guarantee the kind of experience you're going to get from it, assuming you're not, smoking it outside when it's 150 degrees and, your palate's shot from having spicy food 5 minutes earlier.
And it's you gotta choose to smoke the right time. So Patrick, Q is trying to get into the game too. He's trying to get into the game. I gave him I can't remember what I gave him something mild. It was too much for him to stand. But what tips do you give him? What can we give him to start out with?
For like a cigar recommendation?
Yeah, or like tips about cigars, like. Maybe you don't smoke a Churchill yet. You smoke a Robusto, or some tips that you give to the beginners.
Yeah. No, I tend to think of giving recommendations when it comes to cigars, much in the way as I would ask somebody what they like to eat. If you like spicy food, and again, there's a big range of what that means, then that's a sort of way to look at it. Like when it comes to beer or wine, like if you're a beer drinker, do you like lighter stuff? Do you like, lagers and low alcohol stuff like that? Or are you the kind of guy that you're going to look at a menu and say, I want that 13.5% Russian Imperial Stout with cocoa and espresso in it, or something like that. It's like just a huge flavor and it's, heavy and boozy and all that stuff, because that sort of gives you a good reference point that somebody who may not be familiar with cigars can at least identify with. And again, sometimes that's sweet, sometimes that's spicy, sometimes you just want to go mild. And, the problem that I always have with the mild recommendation is sometimes you give somebody a cigar that is so mild that they don't taste anything and they don't understand why is this appealing? I'm smoking air, or all I'm tasting is a really light white bread or something like that. So I think you have to kind of start there, find a good tobacconist who you can have a conversation with and who can understand what you're trying to relate. As far as the cigars, I tend to gravitate or give people as starters. I think like an Ashton Classic is a great cigar to start with. The entire Ashton white label line, the Classic and the Maduro are really, to me, sort of hallmark cigars. Fuente Don Carlos, if you like Cameroon, and it's a unique flavor, and I think you get a really fantastic palate sensation and flavor sensation without it being overbearing. It's really engaging on the palate and, is a fun cigar to smoke, and then again, like Oliva Connecticut's and Oliva O's and G's and stuff like that. And really just kind of going down that road and trying to understand things. And so if you, I sort of equate this to the beer world because I'm not as super knowledgeable when it comes to the intricacies of different types of beer. I know what I like, but I don't always know, like, am I going down a road that is probably going to lead me to something I'm just not going to be a big fan of by doing this. But trying to understand, like, so you smoked a cigar, and yeah, you may not have liked it, but that doesn't mean it was a bad experience, assuming it didn't make you sick because you were inhaling, which you should never inhale. But understand, like, why it didn't work for your palate. Like, was it too sweet? Did it make you feel funny inside? Did it, was it too earthy? Was it too peppery? Was it whatever? And then you can say, so now, like, I've got this reference point for what my palate and what my preferences are. So the next time I go back and get a cigar, I now have something to play it off of, where I can say, like, man, I smoked that Ashton white label cabinet, whatever it's called, and, or Ashton Classic, and like, it was good. It just, I want more out of a cigar. And then you go, okay, well, let's try this. Or I smoked the, whatever Maduro something or other, and like, it was too earthy and too peppery, and it was too much for me. I couldn't enjoy it. And you go, okay, well, cool. Now we got a reference point over here. So let's move you back over to this side. And doesn't mean you won't ever come back to it. It's just, we need to find a place for you to be comfortable exploring what your palate likes and what your system likes. And we'll go from there.
Right. So,
yeah. So I did check some of them out. I don't know when. Like I said, it was kind of heavy when I was hitting it. Obviously, I wasn't inhaling, but it still,
yeah,
the tobacco and the nicotine, all that stuff, really heavy.
No, and it's tough too, because, like, look, if I go and buy if I go to my local beer shop, and I can look at the menu, and they're going to tell you how much alcohol is in that beer, right? So, like, there's some that are 4% and there's some that are 13%. Well, I sort of know, at least from a general idea, like, a 13% beer is going to hit me a little bit harder than a 4% beer. Okay. So, but the problem is, in the cigar world, you don't necessarily get that. You have to sort of go off somebody's recommendation, and somebody says, oh yeah, that's a really strong cigar. And the other half of it too is learning your terminology, because, like, when people in the industry talk about strong cigars, it has nothing to do with flavor. That's all nicotine strength. That's all what it does to your system. And so, like, you can have a cigar that is super flavorful, but it's not strong. It's flavorful. And it has a lot of body, which is the smoke and the mouthfeel and kind of how that interacts with your senses. And then, like I say, you can have a strong cigar that has not a lot of flavor, but it just kicks you square in the stomach and has you feeling woozy for 20 minutes.
I've been there.
Yeah, I know. Every cigar smoker has been there at some point or another. I mean, I find myself there every once in a while.
So Q now we know. Next time we go out smoke now, a Ashton white label. We're gonna do that. So Patrick, where can our listeners find you online and your writing and all that?
So the best place to find me is at halfwheel.com, which is HALFWHEEL.com. It's not your typical cigar term, but it is connected to the cigar industry. That's where I do pretty much all my writing. If you're on social media, you can find me at PHX Cigar Guy, Phoenix Cigar Guy, Instagram, Twitter. Use Instagram a little bit more, but not like the biggest social media person. Or you can follow me for non-cigar related stuff at Pat Lagreid, Lagreid, on Twitter and Instagram, and same thing, a little bit more on Instagram, but not like the biggest social media person. But if you're into the cigar industry and, you want to learn and you want to understand kind of not just about cigars, but about the world around them, I think Halfwheel is a great place to start. So hopefully your listeners head on over and check out halfwheel.com. And one of the cool things is that we offer a daily recap email. So you can sign up for that and you'll get all of our stories in your inbox at like 6 a.m. Central Time. It's a great way just to kind of take a look and see what's been going on in the industry, what may be going on in your neck of the woods when it comes to legislation or on a federal level, and kind of get you plugged into the cigar industry. So that's the best place to find me.
That's great, Patrick. Q, any last remarks before we leave?
I think we have to go back to what Pat said in the beginning. It's just like time in the stair. You put one foot in front of the other. And soon as you know, you can be at the top. You can be at the top of the staircase. And you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, keep reaching out. You never know that last one, that last email, that last call. How you know that's put you to success? Like that one picture, you know, they rocking up trying to get some diamonds. One dude walks away. One dude's keep going. He's right.
That's right.
That's on, man. Never quit. Do what you love.
Yeah, do what you love. You know, because it'll seem like you will never work that day in your life. You know, every day is gonna be a great day, and you know you gotta keep trying.
Yeah, and I sort of preface that because when I was in college and I was doing this internship at a radio station, the program director made a comment to me, you know, and he talked to all the interns and stuff and says, you know, what you have to realize is that whatever you do in your life is like driving a car and the tires have 4 little teeny holes in them. And you're going to drive for so far and then your tires are going to be flat and you're going to have to put more air in them. And so the question is, do you like the drive more than you like the labor of putting the air in? Or whatever you got to fix, you know, in that car, because inevitably something's going to go wrong. As long as you like the drive, you're willing to do the labor that goes into it. But when you start hating the drive because of the work that goes into it, you got to find something else.
I love it. I'm going to take that from you now.
Me too. Share it around, please.
That's you hit the nail on the coffin right there. You know, that's a better way that I was going to say it. And guys, thank you for listening to us. This is Patrick Lagreid from Halfwheel. And Patrick, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Q and Chop, always a pleasure, and hopefully we can do it again one of these days.
Yes, sir.
My pleasure. Q and Chop, always a pleasure, and hopefully we can do it again one of these days.